This morning, I wanted to look at a passage in the Old Testament. And so if you can grab a Bible next to you or pull out your phones, whatever you want to do. And I want to look at just a couple of verses, specifically as our main text. But we're going to look at a few of the things in the Bible. But I wanted to go back to the Old Testament, and I wanted to talk about something that I've been thinking about, just because there's a lot of things going on right now in this kind of fall season. And I want to look at Joshua chapter 24, and it's actually a very famous chapter in the Old Testament, and it's the transition from Moses leading the people out of Egypt through the desert, wandering for 40 years, and then Joshua, after the death of Moses, takes over the leadership of the nation of Israel. He's the one that leads them across the Jordan and through all the battles, all those kind of things, and as he goes there, there's a place where they're now kind of resting. We've kind of taken possession of most of the land that God has promised us. And as he's looking out at the Israelites, he sees something that's disturbing to him. And what he sees is a lot of people that are excited about the victories. They're excited about the things that God has given them, the land, ready-built homes. Can you imagine? I mean, I know it sounds kind of weird, but all of a sudden you go into the promised land that God promised you. You go through a few battles, and now from being, 40 years back, slaves in the nation of Israel, your family transitions, the next generation transitions to where now you have vast new wealth, whole cities to occupy, brand new homes, lands to farm, all kinds of things. God has blessed you. You're prosperous. But as Joshua is looking out at the people, what he sees is this. He sees people who are happy about what God has blessed them with, but people who don't really know God, who don't really worship God, at least not fully. And as he's looking out at that, he realizes they need to make a choice. And here's what he says, and this is not the whole of the speech, but this is one part that I want us to focus on. And he says in verse 14 of Joshua 24, he says this, "Now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Let's pray together as we get ready to look at God's word. Father, I just come before you, and I pray that all of us would just come with just a humble heart and a willingness to kind of let your Spirit search our hearts, to look into our own lives. It's easy to say and label ourselves as Christians, as good people, as moral people, people who are followers of Christ, people who love other people, who want to make a good impact and live good lives and bless others. It's easy to say all those things. But Lord, it's hard to do. And a lot of times we end up compromising. We end up doing things that we ought not. And so today, Lord, as we read these few verses, as we kind of look through your word and what your desire for us is, help us to understand who we are, who you're calling us to be. Help us to kind of live in this world and yet choose to follow after you. So we thank you. We give you all the glory, all the praise. Teach us this morning. Help us to not only just bring offerings and tithes, not just bring time to just come and worship you together as a group and just feel like we fulfilled our religious duty, but rather, Father God, help us to examine and look at our lives. Who do we truly follow? Who do we truly serve? Who is our God? We ask this in Jesus' name. Help us. One of the things that's been going on in my life right now is that there's a lot of labels that are going around. And what I mean by that is right now we're getting ready for a presidential election, right? And I don't know about you guys, maybe you don't talk about politics, and my whole point is not to talk about politics, though Catherine and I have been talking about politics quite a bit, but I've labeled myself for many, many years, just because, they ask you which political party that you affiliate with, as a Republican, because I tend to be fiscally, economically conservative. But in the last few elections, I got rid of that label. I'm no longer a Republican, but I'm definitely not a Democrat. And am I an independent? Am I a moderate? What am I? I don't know. But what I realized is that when you kind of label yourself, then a lot of times you kind of push for a certain agenda, a certain thing, and you feel like you have to vote for a certain candidate. And I'm not going to go there where vote for Trump or vote for Hillary or vote for neither or any of these things. Most of you, the youth group, you're not able to vote yet either. But what I want to tell you is that how you label yourself, whether you do it consciously or unconsciously, is really important. Because it's deeper than just a label. It's the fact that what you identify with is often how you're going to choose to make decisions in your life and how you end up living your life. And one of the things that I found, in my life as I've grown up and I'm getting older and older, and what I found is that most of us at some point go through a major identity crisis, and when we kind of resolve that, hopefully in a healthy, a good way, and you come up with a good identity of who you are, that makes all the difference in the direction and in the growth and in the choices that you make throughout your life. And the sooner you're able to do it, and the earlier that you do it in your life, the more time that you have to build up and to really invest in yourself and to really bear a lot of fruit. Unfortunately, a lot of us don't take seriously this idea of figuring out who I am. Growing up, I don't know what you're going through, especially some of the younger ones that are maybe now in middle school, and even some of the younger ones in high school, and sometimes through high school and through college, but your identity is being formed. And what I want to tell you is you don't come to church every Sunday just because you want to have this label of being Christian, that's a part of your identity. No. Identity within Christ has to be the major factor of who you are. There's so many things in our life that we've been exposed to from a young age. We talked about this last week a little bit with the English ministry congregation and with the older folks, but we talked about how sometimes, we were raised up in the identity of my family, who my family is, how our family functions, the things that we believe, the things that we value, or maybe being Korean or Korean American or some other ethnic group or background, or being raised up in the Western culture that we're raised up in, that we identify with the common values of our day or with my generation or my age group. And all of those things are valid, they're important, but the problem oftentimes is that we don't think about where do those values and where do those actions and behaviors and choices lead me? Where do they come from? And if we don't struggle at some point with our identity, what ends up happening is we make choices without any reason, without any rhyme, and sometimes we live a life that's very contradictory. And when Joshua was looking at the Israelites, he's saying, you guys are God's people. You say that you follow Jehovah, that you follow the one true God, and yet in your house is snuck away in your tent. You think we don't notice, but you have idols from Egypt. You have idols from the Amorites. You have all these things that are compromised. It's all mixed up together. And you guys, it can't be this way. You've seen all the miracles. You've seen all the things that God has done all these years. And yet you're still sitting on the fence. Who are you? And the thing is, going through an identity struggle, figuring out who you are is a part of growing up. It's a part of maturing. But here's the problem. In our day in society, in our age today, and especially I feel this as I see it for the younger generation, you wait longer and longer to make decisions. Do you guys know that the generation right now, in their 20s and 30s, I'm not pointing out anybody, any of our people in our church, but they're getting married later and later. Do you guys know that? I don't know why you guys smiling so big, but they're getting married later and later. Why? I'm not saying, okay, I don't know why I feel like I'm talking about. I'm not, okay? And what we find is that they just can't decide. Is it the right time? Is it the right person? And they want their options wide open. They want to fence it. They just can't make a decision and live with it. And so they don't know. They try this job and that job. They try this major and that major. They search out and they do all. And maybe it's because we have so many opportunities and choices before us and we don't want to miss out on the best. But what we have is we have people that are very fractured, that are very kind of like, have a hodgepodge of opinions, and they don't really make decisions very easily. And this is even true of the older generation as we go along. The thing is that having a lot of choices and going through some kind of identity crisis and choosing the best, those are all good things. But the point that Joshua makes that I want to point out to you is just such an obvious point is, but you have to make a choice sometime. You have to make a decision. You can't keep waffling. You can't keep saying, I'm not sure. I don't know. Let me think about it. Because what you're saying oftentimes when you say that again and again continuously, even though you've had all kinds of time, all kinds of evidence, all kinds of opportunity to make a decision, is that by not choosing, I get to keep my options open and I get to live however I want to live. This is why Joshua says this to the Israelites. Choose today. The day has come. You've got to choose. And there's moments like that God's going to put in your life and he says, okay, what are you going to do? It doesn't mean that you can't choose God later on or you have to choose today, this day, this very moment, October 2nd, at this hour. No, I'm not saying that. But there will come a time in your life when you know the truth, when you know the right choice before you, but you still hesitate because you're afraid of all that comes with making that commitment. Because you know deep inside that when you choose to make that choice to follow after God, it should be wholehearted. That's why Joshua says, now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. And basically a simple way to put it in today's language is this. Give God your all. Give God your all. Jesus says this in the book of Revelation, and he says to one of the churches, he says this, and I'm not going to go back and quote it, but he says this because it's just such an obvious thing. He says to the church, you're neither hot nor cold, you're lukewarm, and I'm about to spit you out of my mouth. I'm about to reject you. We choose to be hot or cold. Either be all for me, or just say you're not, and quit acting like you are. Right now, especially younger folks, the youth group, you may not have too much choices on whether or not to go to church. Catherine has no choice. I'm not saying that she won't come, but she has no choice. I told her and I told Ellie, I said, until you're 18 or out of the house or out of my roof, you need to go to church every single Sunday. And that's just the way it goes. If you decide when you're out of the house that you're going to go do something else, okay. That's your choice at that point. But until then, you do need to make a choice at some point for your life. And so some of you may not have a choice in the matter, and so you're just kind of going along. So I understand that. But when the time comes, when you're out of the house, when you're in college, or you're actually away from your parents, not living under their roof, you're going to have a choice to make. Do I wake up even though I'm tired, maybe even if I don't want to? Do I go look for a church? Do I go find a body of believers at the new campus that I am, at the new place that I am, the new city that I am, to find someone? And at that time, you will know whether or not you truly are seeking after God, to serve Him and know Him. And it's going to come up when you get a job. It's going to come up when you're asked to do something unethical, or when something that comes up that you know in your heart of hearts that God would not be pleased with that, and you're thinking about it, and you have to make a choice on your behavior and on your action. I think a lot of people, when they struggle with identity, it's not so much that they don't know what different identities require of them. It's just that they don't want to fully buy into any of those things. And this is where it's very difficult for us. And this is where we need to understand what it means to take on this identity of a follower of Christ. One of the things that I want to point out to you more than anything else, and I think this is true about so many things in this life, is this. Who you choose to follow is more important than the ideas and the principles that you choose to follow. The reason why I say that is because of this. When you look at the Old Testament, and Joshua is definitely in the middle of the Old Testament, He doesn't say, are you going to choose to follow all the commands that Moses gave us? That's not what he challenges them with. He says, are you going to choose to follow after God? You know what I find is, I find so many people who are set in their ways is that as a Christian, this is what I believe and this is right, and they're not willing to move and they're not willing to change. And here's the problem with that. Because we are finite, because we are fallible, we can have beliefs in Christianity that are wrong. I'm not saying the Bible is wrong, but our interpretation, our understanding of something can be wrong. Our political stance can be wrong. Our economic ideas can be wrong. Our views on certain things can be wrong. And so what I'm saying is don't be dogmatic and don't be just set. I think there's something to be said about Christian history, about orthodoxy, because that's been proven over thousands of years. And so there's a safety, there's a comfort in having wisdom that comes from year after year after year of things being proven. But for me, I don't want to be dogmatic. I don't want to be just doctrinally pure and correct. I don't want to just follow all the rules that I think are right as a Christian, because some Christians disagree. There are Christians that are going to vote for Hillary, and there's Christians that are going to vote for Trump. Neither one is the candidate of God. And for me, in terms of all these issues, the idea is not am I a Democrat or a Republican or an independent or undeclared, nonpartisan, but am I following after God the best that I can? And that is where your identity is going to come from. See, I think a lot of us, without even knowing it, we just adopt values from our family, from people who are older than us, people who have influenced our lives, from our friends, from our schools, from our teachers. It's not necessarily bad, but oftentimes we adopt them so quickly we never examine them. And here's the beauty of following after a person rather than just doctrine. Human beings are all fallible, so that's why I say, never, say I'm going to follow after this pastor or this guru or this educator or this leader. Nobody in this world, no matter how brilliant, no matter how amazing their life, should ever be the person that you're following. You may like their thoughts and their ideology, and they may be a great influence, and they may shape your thinking in your life quite a bit tremendously. That's what God always intended. Parents, good parents, godly parents should influence you. Godly leaders, godly teachers, godly friends, godly mentors, they should all influence you. But ultimately, to the extent that Christ is evident in them. My desire, my aspiration is never to become like someone, human being, but to try to follow after God. The Bible clearly says that we are supposed to become what? Transformed into the likeness of Christ. I think we forget that as Christians a lot of times. Sometimes we get overwhelmed. How can I be like Jesus? There's no way I can be like Jesus. And so we already give ourselves an excuse and say, oh, well, I can't be like Jesus. But the problem is that when we shoot for anyone else or anything else, we're already shooting for something that is fallible and imperfect. We must choose to follow after Christ. Only then can I judge my values that I've gotten from my family, from my Korean culture, from American culture, from my friends, from all the things around, from the media, from the books. Only then can I have a proper filter. Only then will the Bible really mean something to me. Because if you read the Bible, there's a lot of commandments, there's a lot of things in there for me that disturb me, that don't fit me. And what I realize, it's not because the Bible is wrong, it's because I haven't really surrendered fully to following after Christ. Paul says this in Galatians 2:20. He says, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. I mean, I've memorized that verse since I was 18 years old. I've heard that in countless sermons. But the thing that is being said there is so critical. What Paul is saying to the church in Galatia is, I follow Christ. To the point where I don't want any of my own ideas and thoughts and behaviors to override any of the things that he says is right. I want to follow him completely. Now that sounds like very, mindless. That sounds like very, robotic. That sounds like a very foolish way to live. But no, not if we're talking about Jesus Christ, perfect God, man. When we're talking about human beings, that doesn't make any sense. And he says, the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. And he says, my motivation for doing this is because he died for me. He gave himself fully up for me, and he loves me completely, and his desire for me is good. Who are you following? And if you say you're following Christ, do your behaviors, your actions prove it? I think for a lot of us, it's not true. For a lot of us, we actually end up compromising too much. In the beginning, in verse 14, it also says this, now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Whenever we see in the Old Testament where it says fear the Lord, I don't know if we fully grasp it, but we have to understand what fear the Lord means. It means such a level of honor and respect, and such a level of just like worship that we don't want to disappoint. Our biggest thing is that we don't want God to be disappointed in us in some ways, and that's what it means. Of course, there's a fear of punishment and judgment, all these kind of things. But really what it is that if you understand how much God loves you and how much God wants to pour out things into you, you want to please him. And you're afraid of falling short in that way. And then it says, and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. And that's not because you force yourself out of drudgery, because out of pure sheer will and discipline, whether you want to or not, you just beat yourself and just say, okay, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this. God demands it. It's not some heavy burden or onerous chore. But Joshua is saying, I choose to serve him in sincerity and faithfulness because he loves me so much and I want to delight him. I don't want to disappoint him at all. Later on in Jeremiah 29, Jeremiah, in speaking on behalf of God, he says this. He says, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and I will restore your fortunes and gather you from all the nations and all the places where I have driven you, declares the Lord. And you know what this is? This is after the nation of Israel says, we're going to follow after you. After Joshua says all these things, choose who you're going to serve, put away your idols. They said they were going to do that, and they start out with a good intent, and then they end up compromising all over again. And eventually the nation of Israel chases after idols, is not seeking God in any way, shape, or form. There's all kinds of evil and immorality that's going on. And as a result, God, in his loving mercy, you have to understand this, allows them to be defeated and take away captives several times. And here Jeremiah is talking about how God will call them and rescue them and restore them if they will just seek him wholeheartedly. Right now, we're in the middle of the baseball season. I know a lot of the girls maybe not nearly as interesting, but for me, it's been like the worst and the best season because I'm Northern California, so I know all of that, right? But right now, the Dodgers and the Giants are having a series, 3-game series at the end of the season. And Dodgers have been playing amazing. Giants have been horrible. And so the Giants, if they win today, they get a wild card. If not, then they have to play a 1-game playoff, etc., etc. But amazingly, they beat the Dodgers the last 2 games, which, so you guys might go, boo, whatever. But here's the thing. When you see people who are sports fans, here's what you find. You find some people who, because all their church members are Dodgers fans, will become a Dodgers fan. And you find people like me, true fans, who even talk about it in certain honesty. But the thing is even in sports, we have this term called fan. You know what that's short for? Anybody know? Let me just shout out. What's it? Fanatic! We can be fanatical about little things in our life. Sports. What else? Clothes. Okay, food. I think for you that's an idol. Not that kind of issue, right? No, but we can be. We're fanatical about like all these minor kinds of things that are really ultimately not important. Really, think about it. It's not that important. Last week we talked about what shall I eat, what shall I wear? God, what? God knows all those things. Seek first God's kingdom, right? Are you fanatical about God? Fanatical doesn't mean that you're just strange and weird and you dress up weird ways, and if you rip open your shirt, you have a tattoo of God or Jesus or God. That's not what we're saying, but what it's saying is that that's what you're fixated on. That's what your mind constantly turns towards. That is your first priority. Your loyalty goes there first. And may I tell you something? This is where I think a lot of people get confused, because we have so many weird ideas that are floating around by our culture and all these things that we don't understand that this relationship with God as a Christian is calling you to be first. You guys know, actually there's two folks in our English ministry that have recently gotten engaged. And one is Danny Lee that you guys know, and there's another person that you guys don't know very well, but he got engaged just the other day, yesterday actually. And I knew that it was coming along and stuff like that. And so Danny and Hope and I are doing premarital counseling, and Jason, we may do a little bit as well too later on, but one of the things that's really interesting is this. Whenever I do premarital counseling with folks, it's kind of fun because I see them, especially because they're in that glow, and they're in love, and they get married and all this stuff. And some of you know Hope, and some of you guys don't, but she's really a sweetheart. And every time we meet together to do premarital counseling, she ends up crying. And I was like, okay. And the first time I thought, she's just, really overwhelmed and happy and stuff. But every time we just talk about marriage. I'm like, okay, is there some emotion I share or whatever? No, okay, don't tell Danny I said this again. No, I'm kidding. But you know what? Where she cried the most is really interesting. It's when I say, before your husband, before your wife, to me, you have to have a right relationship with God. That's the foundation of an amazing marriage. I remember telling her this one simple analogy, and I thought, okay, that was my analogy. Just drew him a picture of a triangle. I said, this is one thing I want you to keep in mind. Every marriage, ultimately, God always intended to be three people, three persons. What? The husband, the wife, God. And here's the thing. Everybody thinks that if I just have a husband or a wife and we love each other, all that marriage is going to work out, it's going to be good. But I know from counseling people, I know from all the people that I've met and my own marriage and everybody that's married, it's not that easy. Even if you love one another, just, completely, that's fine, that's great. But what you have to understand is that God is there. And when you realize that your worship of God and your surrender to God, if you're both surrendered to God, here's what automatically happens in this triangle of relationship. The more you get in relationship and surrender to God and give Him your all, the closer and closer you're going to just draw to your spouse. It's just automatic. But if one spouse stays here and the other one goes this way, it's still, that same gap is there. And the way that people without God work in their relationship is, okay, you come this way and I'll come this much and we'll meet each other halfway. We'll compromise one way or the other. On this, we'll go this way. On this, we'll go that way. And ultimately, that can work. But the thing is that how are you going to decide on the important things, which way to go? This is why the Bible says don't be unequally yoked. I've met enough people who marry non-Christians and saying, well, they're good people, and they promise that they start coming to church and start, knowing about God, and they get married, and maybe they do fulfill the promise of coming to church, but they're not a believer. And so on these major issues, they're having this crisis of what they believe. And at the beginning, when they were all flushed with love and getting married, it didn't matter. But then after they get married, they realize this is an essential core belief, and we don't share it. What are we going to do? How do we resolve this issue? I'm going to tell you guys something. The key to so many issues of just getting rid of a lot of the problems before they happen in your life is that when you're sold out to God and you're committed and that's your identity and you don't go to the right or the left, but you're fully committed to God, then a lot of other problems that you could create from yourself by not following up, by not making the right choices will be resolved. This is what Joshua is trying to teach the Israelites. This nation that God has created, a theocracy, to be ruled by God, to be servants of God, to be the people of God, will not work unless you put Him first. And then finally he says this, and he gives us but. He says, this is what I want you to do, this is what we're going to do. My family and I, we choose to serve God. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourself this day whom you will serve. And go choose somebody else. That sounds really cold or wrong or bad, but what he's saying is don't act like you're serving God, and just say it clearly and say it outright. And I think the choice of words that he gives is very interesting. He says, if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you. He's not saying, just do it. Sometimes I think we kind of mess up as parents with our children because we just say, just do it because I said so. We don't give them an understanding. It says, we just tell them, we just do it because that's just the way life is. It's, you have to do hard things. Studying is no fun, but But what Joshua says is, if it doesn't seem like very palatable, very desirable to you, and what's being hinted at there is that serving God should be desirable. It should be this amazing desire within you. But if it's not there, then maybe you need to dig a little bit deeper and say, why do I not have a passion for God? You need to sit down and think about that. Here's what Paul says in Philippians. He says, what is more, I consider everything a loss compared to the surpassing greatness of knowing Jesus Christ my Lord. What an amazingly different perspective. He says, oh my gosh, just the fact that I know who Jesus Christ is, there's nothing compared to that. And for whose sake I have lost all things. I'm willing to give up everything. I consider everything rubbish that I may gain Christ. He's saying, Christ is my chief goal, my chief desire. And I know for some of us, it doesn't quite, we don't understand, we don't have that kind of passion. We don't understand what that exactly means. But that's where we're supposed to be. The identity that you have as a Christian should be something so amazing, something that just, there's a passion that drives you to it. And this morning, I'm not trying to tell you, you have to make this choice like Joshua was telling the Israelites, but what I am saying is who are you? And if you were saying that, identifying yourself as a Christian, are you really making that choice wholeheartedly, fully? Is it a desirable choice, or is it something that you think you have to do? Reluctantly, you're doing it because that's where you were brought, that's what you have heard, that's what you feel like you've been, inundated, maybe even brainwashed with. That is not the basis of being a Christian. That is not the basis of your identity. And if you try to go out and face all the difficult choices in this world with that kind of identity, what you're going to find is that you're going to fall flat on your face, make bad choices, be compromised, have all these different kinds of, composite beliefs and idols in your life that are going to mess you up. So my whole point this morning is very simple. Examine whether or not you've made that choice. And if you have made that choice, are you doing it with all? And are you doing it with joy and with passion? We need to ask ourselves this regularly. Too often we don't. And we live our lives with a mixed identity. And there's two major things that I want to point out as I end. When you have that mixed identity, you make all kinds of wrong choices, blind choices, and you don't even know that you made them. And the second thing is that when people look at you, they see contradiction after contradiction, and you're not a witness for God. I want to encourage you. I want to just challenge you. To just examine and say, who am I? And when you take your identity as a Christian seriously, when you really understand it and you begin to walk in it, there's such freedom, such joy, such blessing. So I want to encourage all of you this morning, once again, just to kind of think about that and then think about how much God loves us. And when we do that, may there stir up a passion, a desire to know God, to be His, to serve Him, that helps you in all the times.